Welcome. It is Verdict with Ted Cruz, Weekend Review. Ben Ferguson with you, and these are the stories you may have missed that we talked about this week. First up, a big story coming out of Washington, D.C. National Guardsmen that were shot, one of them killed. And what we now know is the media wanted to blame Donald Trump for this. Well, they now have had a massive backfire, as we're learning that this was clearly lack of vetting done and warnings that were there by the Biden administration that they were letting people in this country that could be a threat to all of us. I'll have all those details for you in just a moment. We're also joined by Scott Jennings. You know him from CNN. He's talking about his new book and also AI and what you need to know. It's really incredible. And finally, a massive win for the President of the United States of America, telling Americans, I want to get out of your car. Cafe standards are now changing and going backwards. And what does that mean? A car that you can buy is going to be a lot lower priced. It's the Weekend Review, and it starts right now. The media is trying to say that these National Guardsmen that shot, one of them has died as the time we are doing this. It happened, they're trying to say, because of Donald Trump rewriting the history and the warnings going back to, as we just played there, from September of 2021 on this exact thing happening in reality.
Yeah, at the same time, I wrote an op-ed in Fox News where I said, unfortunately, I believe we will see American blood spilled because of these foolish mistakes. And I went on to say, the truth is that the Taliban doesn't want to be welcomed into the community of civilized nations. They are vicious terrorists who want to kill us. Unfortunately, because of the catastrophic mistakes the Biden administration made in Afghanistan, we are much more at risk for deadly attacks by the Taliban or al-Qaeda, which Pentagon officials estimate could regroup in Afghanistan in the next year or two. It's a disgrace, and the fault lies directly with President Joe Biden and his administration. This was obvious at the time. And look, you heard on that clip in September 21, I'm talking about seeing the Donna Ana tent facility. I when I showed up there, I was like, well, are there any fences around it? No. None. Is there any barrier? They're like, no, this is not a prison facility. And it was a one-star general who was taking me around in the helicopter. And I'm like, well, what happens? You're saying anyone can leave? He's like, yeah, they're not detained. We're just offering them housing. Think of this like an apartment complex. They can stay here if they want, or if they want to go somewhere else.
They can go. If they
want to
can
go somewhere else.
And
I asked the Army, are y'all doing any vetting here? They said, no, the State Department does that in Afghanistan. So it's all done before they get there. So they got 10,000 people there, and who knows where they went. They don't keep a record of them. They don't ask, where do you go? I mean, that's part of the infuriating problem that the Biden administration invited into this country. Islamists, terrorists who explicitly want to murder us. And by the way, you know what is unbelievable? It is the shooting in D.C. was one of two Afghans who were arrested this week for threatening violence. Another one happened in Texas. Here's one report from Breitbart. An Afghan national admitted to the United States under President Biden's Operation Allies Welcome Resettlement Program was arrested this week after posting a TikTok video in which he appeared to be building a bomb and referenced Fort Worth as a target, according to the Department of Homeland Security. Department of Homeland Security Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin reported the arrest of Mohammed Dawood Al-Okazeh, saying he allegedly posted a video on TikTok threatening to blow up a building in Fort Worth, Texas, with a bomb. The Texas Department of Public Safety and the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force teamed up to make the arrest on charges of making terroristic threats. This is happening, and by the way, it continues to be. Al-Okazeh is an Afghan national who was pardoned into the United States by the Biden administration. His arrest came one day prior to the vicious attack on two West Virginia National Guard soldiers in Washington, D.C. by another Afghan national. This pattern, when you let people in, you don't vet them, this violence and this terrorism is predictable. And you had a combination of, for 4 years, an open southern border, so any Hamas or Hezbollah or other terrorists could come in through the southern border.
You combine what we're witnessing now with what you just mentioned, Senator, at the southern border. We knew for a fact that people on the terrorist watch list were coming across our southern border, the same border that when Texas tried to secure it, the federal government said, no, we're going to use forklifts to raise up the barbed wire to let more people in. We have that on video. We talked about that on Verdict. They knew that people were getting on the terrorist watch list, people that wanted to kill Americans. They knew there was a real threat of sleeper cells in this country coming from multiple places around the world.
And there still is.
Al-Shabaab, exactly, still is. And you combine that with this, and you sit there and you go, basically, they said, look, we know people are going to die, but we want an open border. We know terrorists are coming in. We know they're on the watch list. We know we're catching some of them. There's a lot of gotaways that we don't catch. This is just the cost of doing business. There will be human carnage of American citizens, the abuse of children, the rape of children, the sex trafficking of children. There will be murderers and all sorts of people in this country. We know that. It's worth it to flood America with illegal immigrants. That was a calculated decision they made.
It was, and the two occurred simultaneously. So on the one hand, they're opening the southern border and letting anyone come in.
Yep.
But on the other hand, they're affirmatively flying tens of thousands of Afghans. And by the way, we don't have any firm numbers in terms of how many they brought in. In terms of vetting, you don't have anyone from the Biden administration saying, oh, yeah, we thoroughly vetted this guy before we brought him here, because their view was there was nothing to vet. If they're bringing a 50-year-old dude with an 8-year-old girl that he says is his wife, that shows you how utterly incompetent the vetting is, that they just didn't care. Ideologically, they believed, well, their culture, apparently it's okay to rape little girls. And so they certainly were not asking, engaging in the serious vetting. And it's difficult. Look, one of the problems with vetting a place like Afghanistan is there are limited records. And so that's not an easy task. In my view, unless you can conclusively determine that this person is not a terror threat, we should not be bringing them to America. And so, but the Biden administration, I don't believe, was even trying to vet them in any serious way. They were just bringing in numbers because this was all about politics rather than the substance of keeping America safe.
All right, Senator, I want to go back to a little over a year ago, and let's just remind people of the Democratic Party and also how we got to the point that we're at right now.
Well, this just shows the overlap we were talking about before, that ideologically today's Democrat Party refuses to acknowledge the threat of radical Islamic terrorism, refuses to acknowledge radical Islam, and that it is fundamentally anti-American. And so in April of 24, there were protesters in Dearborn, Michigan, and it was the International Al-Quds Day rally, where they began chanting "Death to America." And when that happened, so Dearborn, Michigan is in Rashida Tlaib's district. She is the member of Congress that represents Dearborn, Michigan. You have a rally in her district chanting "Death to America," and Fox News quite reasonably came and asked her if she would condemn that. Give a watch and give a listen to how she responded.
El Monte Africa! El Monte Africa! El Monte Africa!
Not a great look. The mayor condemned it. The White House condemned it. But what about Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib? She reps Dearborn. Is she okay with her constituents chanting "Death to America"? Fox Business correspondent Hillary Vaughn asked her. Watch.
Congresswoman Tlaib,
Fox News. I don't talk to Fox News.
at a rally in your district, people were chanting "Death to America." Do you condemn?
I do not talk to Fox News.
Do you condemn chants of "Death to America"?
I don't talk to people that use racist tropes.
Why can't you just say whether or not you condemn people chanting "Death to America"? Why are you afraid to talk to Fox?
Fox News is not listen, using racist tropes towards my community is what Fox News is about, and I don't talk to Fox News.
Is "Death to America" racist?
Fox News.
Is chanting "Death to America" racist?
I'm talking about your guys' racist tropes. You know, you guys know exactly what you do. I know you're Islamophobic, but you guys got to go deal with it on your own self. You're not going to use me.
All right, Senator, you go back to that, and it's just one of those moments where the warning signs are there. We tell you that these warning signs are there, and then it happens, and I hate it that it happens, but it's so predictable now.
You know, it reminds me when Obama was president, John Kerry was Secretary of State, there was an editorial cartoon, and it had the Ayatollah in Iran going, "Death to America!" And it had John Kerry saying, well, can we meet you halfway?
Yeah.
That's the ideological incoherence. Look, when you walk down the halls of Congress, and you've been there with me, Ben, reporters stop you all the time. By the way, I answer questions from Fox News. I answer questions from CNN. I answer questions from New York Times. I answer questions from every lefty outlet just walking along, because if you know what you believe, I got to say, that's not a gotcha question. It's not a difficult question. Do you support death to America? If you are a member of the United States Congress, the Congress of the United States of America, one would think it ought to be easy to say, yeah, of course, death to America is wrong. I'm against that. That should not be difficult for anyone. It speaks volumes that Rashida Tlaib was unwilling to even condemn chance of death to America in her own congressional district. That shows just how dangerous the ideological rot is. And tragically, we saw the very real consequences of that ideological rot in letting unvetted Afghan immigrants into this country, one of whom just murdered one D.C. National Guardsman and may have murdered a second. We pray that he survives, but at this point, our prayers are with him because we don't know if he's going to survive the horrific attack.
Now, if you want to hear the rest of this conversation, you can go back and listen to the full podcast from earlier this week. Now on to story number 2.
So on AI is an issue I care about a lot, and I agree with you that we are in a race. AI is coming, and either the United States is going to win or China is going to win. And I think the world is much, much worse off if China wins, and it's much better off if America wins. I will tell you, the polling on AI is terrible. AI is unpopular in America. If you do almost any polling you do, it's about 70-30. People are terrified. Yeah. They're afraid they're going to lose their jobs. They don't trust it. They're scared of it. And I get that. And in fact, I talk with a lot of the tech leaders, and I say, look, if you don't engage on this issue, the easy political outcome, every Democrat and a number of Republicans are like, AI is horrible, we oppose it. And that, if you look at the polling, that's the knee-jerk response. I get that fear. I understand. Anytime you have economic dislocation, it is frightening, it is dangerous. But at the end of the day, I'm not a Luddite. I don't think you can stop technological advancement. I'll give you an example. If I could right now destroy every cell phone in America, I would. I think these are evil portals to everything harmful in the world. All three of us are parents. These things invite every horrible force to our children.
Yep.
But we don't live in that world. We can't end that. I'd also like a world with no nuclear weapons. Like if I could push a button and every nuclear weapon disappear, I would. But we don't live in that world. And if we're going to live in a world with nuclear weapons, I sure as heck want to make sure the United States has enough that China and Russia and our enemies can't dominate us. I view AI in the same world. Even if you don't want it to happen, it is coming. And one of two outcomes will occur in 5 to 10 years. Either China will have won the race, in which case AI worldwide will reflect China's values, will be totalitarian, will be controlling, will be censoring, will reflect the values of communist China, or America will have won, in which case hopefully AI will reflect American values of freedom, free enterprise, free speech. That is a massive shift. Between those two worlds, World 2 is much better, where America wins. 2 questions. Number 1, do you agree with that? And number 2, if so, how does the politics change? Do you agree with my point that right now the politics is against AI, and that is dangerous?
Yes, I agree. First of all, on point 1, I agree with everything you said about which world we want to live in. Number 2, I agree with you on the polling, and I think people have a healthy fear of how this is going to upend their life.
Quite reasonable.
Which is a reasonable fear. And so the next iteration of this march towards AI is going to have to be not how it's going to make your life worse. How is it going to make your life better? How has any other technological evolution ultimately made your life better? And so that explanation has to come. And then point 4 is just going to be, how are we going to power it all? And, are we going to be able to produce enough energy to do what we have to do now, plus what we have to do?
AI is energy. And if we don't unleash energy, we cannot win the race for AI.
One other issue on this that is on my mind is, how are we going to build enough of these data centers to win this thing? I'm noticing in local communities in a lot of places, folks are like rising up against data center development.
So the polling is terrible in most communities. But I will say, by the way, one of the few exceptions is sort of West Texas. You've got West Texas in the Panhandle, and you're seeing a ton of data centers come in there. And Texans are like, all right, we want jobs, we want investment, we want billions in investment, and there'll be jobs for construction, there'll be jobs for running the data centers. Look, I think in dense urban areas, people are afraid. They're afraid it will suck power, it will drive up their electricity prices, it will suck water. And I get those fears. Look, anyone, if you're given a choice, do you want something that will make your life worse or better? People are naturally going to say, I don't want something that makes my life worse. I think
I had a guy, by the way, Senator, I had a guy the other day that said to me in the AI industry, he said the hardest part for them now is overcoming what you're describing, because he said their polling data internally says that the fear in a lot of parts of the country right now are at the level of where they were with nuclear reactors back in the 80s.
Yes.
Interesting.
No, and there's been a lot of demagoguery, but there's also the demagoguery is there, but I will say the fears of AI are real and justified. All right, look, with every great technological change, there's been economic dislocation. So when the automobile was invented, the horse and buggy industry was decimated. And if you were in the buggy business, you were screwed. The difference with AI is twofold. Number one, the volume is greater. I think there are going to be more jobs that are going to be threatened by AI than have been in previous technological innovations. Number two, it's a different contour of jobs. So often in the past, it's been blue-collar jobs that have been at risk. Many of the jobs that are at risk with AI are white-collar jobs. So if you look at Mondami, part of what elected Mondami is you have young college graduates who have $200,000 in college debt, who were told, I can go and be an investment banker, a consultant, or an accountant, and they're seeing those jobs being eliminated as AI is replacing thousands and thousands of those jobs. Yeah. That's a level of, I guess I would call elite discontent that is politically complicated. Mm-hmm. And so, and I get those concerns are very real. If you've gone and worked hard and you got a degree and you took out loans and you were told this is what I got to do, and then suddenly you come out and you can't get a job, you're pissed. Like, that's a very real concern. And so I actually think as policymakers, as people in elected office, we need to have real solutions to that problem, because that discontent is not illegitimate, but it is driving much of this resistance, and it's a very real battle we got.
Well, and you have now for many years people teaching their children, here's the course you got to get on. Yeah. Do well in school, go to college, you can get one of these white collar jobs. And for a few generations we've been telling people this is the path. That may not be the path anymore. We're going to have to reorient how we're educating kids, what we're teaching them to do, what other skills can we teach them to do. I agree with you on the white collar versus blue collar issue. Also creatives. I mean,
they're freaked out.
I've seen AI apps in a matter of seconds write songs that sounded like they had a whole team of musicians and writers over weeks putting them together in California, and it literally happened on my phone in a matter of seconds.
By the way, I'll tell you, in politics, it's interesting. I'll pull up AI and I'll ask something like, what has Cruz said on the following issue? And listen, I've been doing this a long time, so I don't remember every comment I've given in every newspaper interview 10 years ago. And in like 4 seconds, it comes out with, he said this here, he said this here, and it like traces, and it's like,
it's insane.
It is insane, the ability of power you have on your cell phone.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and it's basically free. I mean, information for the first time in human history is basically accessible to all and free to all and instant. And yeah, I can see why the polling on this is bad. Now, the positive outlook here is, how can we use these tools to make your life easier, make you more productive, and maybe make you more economically successful? Maybe you haven't conceived of how that will work yet, but that's the challenge of these companies that are developing the technology.
As before, if you want to hear the rest of this conversation on this topic, you can go back and download the podcast from earlier this week to hear the entire thing. I want to get back to the big story, number 3 of the week, you may have missed. Senator, on Wednesday, you were at the White House for a really cool moment, and that was President Trump saying, I want government to get out of your way and stop making things so expensive for you, specifically cars, having a reset of CAFE standards that were out of control. That is going to lower the cost of cars for many Americans. We're also getting rid of the obsession with a mandate for EV vehicles, which the Democrats were hell-bent on. And this is going to, again, make cars more affordable for Americans. Everyone should be excited about that.
Well, that's exactly right. After spending Monday at the White House with the president while he was signing my legislation, tripling the monthly stipend for Medal of Honor recipients, after spending Tuesday at the White House with the president and Michael and Susan Dell giving $6.25 billion to the kids of America for Trump accounts, on Wednesday, I joined the president again, this time with the CEOs of the major auto companies in the United States, as the president was implementing legislation, a provision again that I wrote, zeroing out the CAFE standards. The CAFE standards were the federal mileage requirements that the Biden administration used to jack them up so high that it, number one, made cars much, much more expensive, but number two, it was part of their effort to eliminate the internal combustion engine, to force everyone to buy an electric car whether they want it or not. And as part of the one big beautiful bill, we zeroed that out entirely. I wrote that provision, and on Wednesday, the president was implementing it. Here, I want you to give a listen to the president describing the historic steps he took on Wednesday.
From day one, I've been taking action to make buying a car more affordable. I signed an executive order to end the unfair, expensive electric vehicle mandate. As you know, we had to have an electric car within a very short period of time, even though there was no way of charging them and lots of other things. It would have cost $5 trillion to build the charging plants. And as you know, in certain parts of the Midwest, to build 9 chargers, they spent $8 billion. So that wasn't working out too well. That was done before me, by the way. I wouldn't have let it go forward. We're canceling the EPA's absurd tailpipe emission standards, one of the most important things that I've never had a group of people come to me more powerfully and really just devastated that they had to do it. It was killing them than the automobile manufacturers, the tailpipe emission standards. And I can tell you, your people at Ford were coming to me all the time and they were saying, like, please, it doesn't do anything and it's killing us. And it's driving the cost through the roof. And we revoked Biden's emissions waiver for California so that California communists could not regulate the automobile industry and ruin the entire nation of automobiles. And they were doing that too. But we have that now under control also with your governor, who's got much more than he can control. Now, under the new rules being issued today by Secretary Duffy, the Department of Transportation will rescind the Biden fuel economy prices. And I hate to say that because they were really not economy. They were really, they were anti-economy. They were horrible what they were doing to the costs and actually making the car much worse. But these policies forced automakers to build cars using expensive technologies that drove up costs, drove up prices, and made the car much worse. The action is expected to save the typical consumer at least $1,000 off the price of a new car, and we think substantially more than that.
Senator, you hear him talk about this. This is exactly what I think so many Americans voted for. It's government actually not mandating things. It's government getting out of the way of insane regulations to make your life easier. Just give me a little bit of my freedom back. Let the private sector do what the private sector does. Stop putting all this government agenda on top of me and let me do what I want to do. If I want to buy an EV, I'll buy an EV. But don't force me to do something and don't make these standards so insane that you raise the cost of cars to the point where I can't even afford a new one.
It's your choice. It should be your choice. If you decide you want to go buy a Tesla, Teslas are amazing automobiles. You can go do that. But if you decide you want to drive your F-150, that ought to be your choice too. And this legislation and what the president did this week, benefited consumers, lowered prices, made cars and trucks a lot cheaper. It also made them safer. It saved lives. It also helps produce jobs, thousands and thousands of jobs, as billions of dollars are being invested by car manufacturers in the United States. We're bringing blue-collar jobs back to America. Ben, here's how I explained it in the Oval Office, standing next to the president. Give a listen.
Anybody else want to say a few words? Oh, Ted, I can't believe it.
I'm easy to miss.
It's very rare that I would miss it. Go ahead, Ted.
Well, Mr. President, I want to congratulate you on behalf of everyone here for the leadership that you're showing. And this is a victory today for consumers. This is a victory for affordability. Your critics like to say the word affordability. Under Joe Biden and the Democrats, they put mandate after mandate after mandate on cars and trucks, and they drove the price up thousands and thousands of dollars. And with the actions you're taking today, and you put on top of that the one big beautiful bill, you know, most of the senators here on the Senate Commerce Committee and on the Commerce Committee, we worked together to zero out the CAFE standards. We wrote that into the law that the CAFE standards went to zero. What does that mean? It means you can now, as a consumer, buy the car you want. It also means people's lives will be safer, because what these regulations did is they forced cars to be more expensive and made of plastic instead of steel, because you had to make them lighter to comply with these standards, so you'd get in a wreck and people would die. The result of what you're doing, you're literally saving people's lives, and you're making it where families can afford to get a new car. These actions will drop the cost of cars and trucks thousands of dollars. That makes a real difference. And I'll make one final point. You know, about half the members here are car dealers. And I will say my good friend Roger Williams out in the lobby, he tried to sell me a car, which didn't surprise me, but I just want to give props to Mike Kelly. He showed he was savvier because he tried to sell you a car, and you can afford a much nicer car than I can. So well done, Mike Roger. You just went to the wrong customer.
I was $100 cheaper.
The thing that Ted just said, it's true. Plastic instead of steel. Think of that. And people died because of that. The plastic was plastic in an auto accident, and it broke up, and people were shattered because of that crazy deal. But it's a really good point. Go ahead.
And Mr. President, I'll tell you, in the Senate Commerce Committee on January 14th, we're going to have a hearing with all of the big three there and Tesla, and the entire hearing is going to focus on how your leadership has reduced the burdens on car makers. That's lowering costs, that's giving consumers more choices, and it's producing more jobs in America. And it's highlighting that's a real record of success.
Not only is it a record of success, but as you mentioned there and highlighted, and the president agreed with you, it's an issue of safety, Senator.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's these CAFE standards were making cars much, much more dangerous, and we'll never know who, but there are people who will live now because of this change, because they'll be able to be in safer cars. Some of it is they may be able to afford a new car now, because as this drives down the price of new cars and new trucks, they may sell their old used car and buy a new car because it makes it more affordable. New cars typically have more safety features and enhance their safety. But secondly, if you're not having to make these cars and remove all the steel, you're much more likely to survive an accident if you're in a car that has some weight, has some steel, and doesn't just crumple up like a beer can.
As always, thank you for listening to Verdict with Senator Ted Cruz. Ben Ferguson with you. Don't forget to download my podcast, and you can listen to my podcast every other day you're not listening to Verdict, or each day when you listen to Verdict afterwards. I'd love to have you as a listener to, again, the Ben Ferguson podcast, and we will see you back here on Monday morning.